Hey, what's the story? In this box is something that I've been waiting for the Sony ZV-E1 for a long time because it's going to make it a whole lot safer to use. In fact, what's in this box is something you should be buying for nearly any camera that you have because not only will it protect it, it's going to make it better to use. So let's jump into this, which is the cage kit for the Sony ZV-E1. This is the SmallRig version. In the box, what have we got? Well, we've got the cage. And we have also a HDMI clamp. Now, HDMI clamps, these little ones, so hold it up to this camera, focus, anything focus. No, nothing's gonna focus for me. HDMI clamp is probably one of the most important things that you can get for the camera, especially because it's the micro, it's the mini, it's the tiny, it's the pain in the butt HDMI. So this is gonna clamp the cable in. But enough about that. Let's get the cage on and go through what you can actually do with a cage for the Sony ZV-E1. On the bottom of the cage, we have this key which serves a couple of purposes. So this is absolutely tiny and it's sealed magnetically. And essentially what this is, you can take off the grip here if you don't like it, and you can tighten things in. So let's get the Sony ZV-E1 into the rig here, and then we're going to go through the actual cage and what's on it. First things first, don't work. Nope, not gonna happen. So the lens has to come off. So just be aware of that. So once we get our lens of the Sony ZV-E1 off, which is the Sony, what we got to do is we got to take these off here first, really quickly. So we just screw these off. These are side. I'm not actually sure these are for. I presume they're supports. So generally, what I would suggest is when you do get a cage for any camera, you should never really be taking it off. There may be a time coming where you have to take it off for whatever reason. Now, before we get the cage on, there is something to note here quite quickly. If you use these kind of quick release straps for a peak design or whatever, these are peak designs so you can get the camera on and off a strap really quickly, then these are not going to work with cage because these little support brackets here need these hooks essentially. And what you can do, however, is the cage actually does come with hooks for these straps. So all is good, but it's just something that if you use these, just remember, otherwise you will waste 10 minutes trying to figure out like I just did, but none of you saw that because it wasn't in the edit. Was it, Vic? The engineering on these things is absolutely nuts. Now, here's something that I learned the hard way, and even though it is mentioned in the manual, how many of us do read the manual? Even though the manual with the SmallRig cage for the Sony ZV-E1 is not that big. It says, do not tighten this fully. The reason being is these little supports here will not go back in. So keep that in mind. Got this on, and to be fair, it only took a couple of minutes. So there's a few things here. First off, the grip. This SmallRig cage gives substantially more grip to the camera. It feels a lot more solid. Like the grip, it's like doubling the grip on the Sony ZV-E1. So it feels so much more bigger in the camera. Now the ergonomics of it, your hand kind of naturally falls here on the shutter, which is good. And I guess when you look at the mounting points, we've got a whole bunch of mounting points here. Now, SmallRig did send me something else for here, which I'm going to get into in a sec, and it is bonkers. But we've got mounting points here, 1/4" thread, the usual stuff. So you could put a light on here, you could put lights up here, mics. There's so much stuff that you could put onto this. So you have a whole bunch of mounting points. And of course, we've got another bunch down here as well. So this is where your tripod or your grip or whatever you're going to plug in is going to go on the bottom. Now, do the doors all open? SD card opens. The micro HDMI, that opens perfectly. Then our mic and USB all works really, really well, and our screen flips out, no problem whatsoever. Because there's more weight in the camera, here's the other side of it, right? This just gives the camera that little bit more protection, because if this falls, it's going to protect the sides and the top here quite a bit, because metal is going to take the impact. And this thing is really, I can't actually believe how firm the camera is. Let me show you what's in this box, because this is where it really ups the game. If you're anyway serious about using the Sony ZV-E1, the more control you take over the camera, better. Now, SmallRig sent me this as well, this little handle. You're like, okay, that's a weird looking thing. But in the box is this thing, and they also give you an Allen key in the box as well. This is SmallRig's universal rotating handle, and let me tell you, this thing is nuts the way it works. So what we got to do first is we got to slide on our little NATO rail here, and this conveniently screws onto the side here. One thing when it comes to screwing in the NATO rail, just make sure the screws are kind of sunken before you screw them all in. Otherwise you'll start shearing away. But once this bad boy goes on with the Allen key that comes in the box, then you are really going to be in for a hell of a control freak, because what this does is pretty special. So this is a handle. There's a little button here which I'm going to show you guys what that does momentarily. So all you got to do is press it and this turns. So that locks, and it's really solidly locked. Let's just tighten this in. Then we have a wallop. And now if we keep this button pressed down with our thumb, we can actually tilt the camera, giving us an extra element of control. And it's just so solid, so there's no fear of the camera falling off. Just obviously make sure you've got it tightened. And up the top here, we have got a cold shoe mount, so we could put something else on here. It could be a mic, it could be a light, it could be whatever you want. And then we've got even more mount options up here as well, 1/4" thread and so on and so forth. So you can really build this rig out hugely. The build quality is amazing. Now, even without this handle, and this is one of the kind of the cheaper handles, this is a bit more plasticky, so there's not that kind of rubber grip on it, but it's still really good. And anything that gives you more control over the camera is a win. So forget about the handle for a sec, right? Just the cage on its own, the grip here is worth the price of the cage alone. For the extra control, for the extra stability that you get with the SmallRig cage for the Sony ZV-E1, it's really hard to fault. Now, admittedly, it's a little bit fiddly to get on. Really straightforward, a few minutes to set up, and at the twist of a screw, you can see, look at this for security. This will not come off until you press the button. Gotta say, thanks to SmallRig for sending this. I'm really well impressed with this cage. The fact that you've got all of these mounting options, you should be really covered for, I guess, nearly everything that you're going to put on the Sony ZV-E1. Now, I've got some more accessories coming. Finally, accessories are coming for the Sony ZV-E1. Not just generic stuff, but stuff that's purposely built for the Sony ZV-E1. I've got a ton more on the way that could well and truly elevate this camera even more. But this SmallRig cage, absolute win.